Hey guys, this is Mitch from 5.CGI, and today we're going to talk about collisions, and we're going to talk about how to make it so you can walk around using that first-person player controller that you downloaded. So we're going to do that, and then if we have time, we'll talk about interacting with rigid body objects, and we're going to talk about that as well. So let's get started. All right, so I'm here in Godot, and the first thing that we can do is we can talk about scenes. If you remember when I was talking about scenes, you can see it. Remember this player scene, this little tab up here. You remember that we have this player scene, right? Well, this is all great, but we can't actually do anything with it in this level, right? Well, what we can do is we can actually drag this into the project, and there you go. You have a first-person controller inside of your project. So let's go ahead and drag that up, and you can see, look at that. There's a guy. Yay. So what we're going to do is we're also going to right click, add a child node. We're going to add a mesh node. So let's add a mesh instance and go ahead and hit enter. So what is a mesh instance? Well, a mesh instance is basically a node. And a node, well, everything is a node, to put it in perspective. I mean, if you see here, there is a player here, and that's a node, and then there's a mesh instance that is also a node. But a mesh instance specifically is a three-dimensional object that's rendered on your scene. So things like floors, walls, boxes, stuff like that's going to be a mesh instance. So if we go over here on the right, you'll see that we don't actually see anything, but if we go to the right, you can see that there's an empty mesh instance. So let's go ahead and click on that. And let's go ahead and add a plane mesh instance. So you can see we have this plane. I mean, it's just a flat object, and a plane is literally just a flat one-sided, so if you go underneath it, you can see through it, object here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and click on the scale tool, and we're going to drag this out. So let's go ahead and zoom out, and let's scale this object quite large, not super large, but quite large. What we're going to do also is we're going to create another spatial node, and we're going to, well, actually first, let me just go ahead and show you what happens here. So if I play this scene, you'll see, oh, I just fell through the world. See that? So if we hit Alt F4 and we stop playing back, you can see that this guy just falls through that plane, and your character will fall forever. So what we're going to go ahead and do is add collision to that. So we'll right click this, we will add a child node, and we will do collision shape. And you'll notice that if we hit play now, well, nothing changes, right? Well, what you've noticed, or what you can see here, is that there's an exclamation point. A collision shape only provides collision to shape to a collision-derived node. Please only use it as an area, static, rigid, kinematic, e.g. to give them a shape. Well, all right, that's a lot of words, but what does that mean? Well, if we go ahead and right-click this and add a child node, we can add a body object to this. So you can see here, actually right above it, we have kinematic body, physical bone, rigid body, and a static body. Well, depending on what you want in Godot, you use different bodies to do those things. So for instance, you want to make a player or a character, you go ahead and do a kinematic body. You want to create something that like let's say someone that dies and has rigid physics or rigid body physics, you would use a physical bone. If you want something that just falls, like a ball or something like that, that's what a rigid body is for. If you want to build a vehicle, that's what a vehicle body's for. If you want to build something that doesn't move, you use a static body. So let's go ahead and click static body here. And you notice that the static body has an exclamation point as well. This node has no shape, so it can't collide or interact with other objects. What does that mean? Well, it means that you need a collision shape. So let's go ahead and put the collision shape underneath the static body by clicking and dragging it. So you can see if I click and drag, you'll see this little line that appears, or a box that appears over top of it. If I let go, it puts it underneath that object. Now, You can still see that there's an exclamation point here. And if I hit play, you'll notice that I still fall through the world. And if I hit Alt F4 to kill my game, you'll notice that it didn't work. But why didn't it work? Well, that's because this has no shape. So if you were to zoom in, you can see that there's nothing here. It's just an empty object. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add a shape to it. So let's click on this click on the collision shape. Then go ahead over here and you can see this little shape object here. If you click on that, you can add in a box shape. So let's go ahead and add that. You can see that it automatically did this for us, but I'm going to show you guys how to do it anyway. Because it's defined by a mesh instance, it automatically detected that and created a collision shape at the right size. But if it did create it incorrectly for you, you can actually drag this around, see, and change the size of this box. And this box determines where things collide. So if I put this down to almost nothing, you can see how I can make it huge, or I can make it down to nothing. If I drag it down to nothing, you can see that the collision shape perfectly matches our plane. Now, if I hit play, you'll notice that our character's landed. Look at that. Well, isn't that cool? And we can shoot and run around and jump with the space bar. So that's exciting. It actually works. And if we run off to the edge, oh no, we fall forever. So that's the basics of what collision is. Collision allows your character to collide, or objects to collide. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to right-click spatial node, add in another mesh instance. Okay, and we're going to add in a cube. Okay, so if I click on mesh instance and I click on my empty and I create a cube mesh object, let's go ahead and position this somewhere over here, I guess. And we're going to, well, actually, let's point it at our camera. So where is our camera pointed? I believe our camera's pointed this direction. So let's go ahead and place this like that in front of our character so we can see it, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to right click this, and remember how we had to create a static body and a collision shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a body, and we're going to go ahead and add a rigid body. So let's go ahead and create that. And you'll see again, we have a exclamation point. It doesn't have a shape. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add a shape for it. So let's create a shape, a collision shape. So we'll go ahead and add that. We'll come over here and we will add in a box shape, and you'll see that it'll automatically constrain to the right size. Though again, you can adjust it if you would like. See, so I can make it smaller or larger if I want to. So now what's going to happen is if we hit play, oh, whoops, I clicked the wrong play. If you click play, you'll notice that this object doesn't do anything. I can walk through it. It doesn't do anything. But why is that, right? Why isn't this being affected by anything? What we can do is what we need to do is we need to click on rigid body, and we can look at all the different things that this object can do. So you can see here, can it sleep? You know, is it locked on an axis, linear, dampening, things like that, right? You can see that there are different types of bodies that are attached to this as well. And again, we're not going to go into too much depth about this, but just know that you have all of these options, and go ahead and mess with all of these options. You know, if I were to bring the weight down, you can see how it adjusts the mass and stuff like that. We go ahead and hit play. See that again? Doesn't seem to be doing anything. Isn't that crazy? So what we need to do is to drag the rigid body out like this and drag the mesh instance underneath that, and then you should be good to go. So now if I hit play, what you will see is, oh, again, I keep making that mistake. If I hit play on the little scene icon, you'll see the thing fall, and we can run up to it and press and push it around. So you can see here, we push it around. And if we shoot it, it goes flying. So that's the basics of rigid body. So what are some of these commands, or what are some of these features in this rigid body? So if we go ahead and click on this, you can see that there's like weight, mass, things like that. So if we actually drag this up and we hit play, what's going to happen is it doesn't move. If I push it, it does move though. So you can see that you can actually make it so that this object has weight to it, that it exists, that it actually has different properties to it. And I believe that's where we're going to leave it for now, guys. We have a rigid body, we have our character running around, things like that, which is great. In the next video, I'm going to talk about lighting, materials, textures, things like that. So look forward to that, and I'll see y'all next time. Thanks.